All right, let's do a CP3 mod on this. Let's talk a little bit about them first, and then we'll get into the procedure. This is based on what I've researched. I'm not an expert at this, but maybe this will help you kind of narrow some things down on your search, trying to figure out how to do yours. A couple places that you can get these pumps from that I know of. There's Stevenson Tuning. That's where I got this one. The last one I got from Mac Performance. I would always suggest before you put it in to make sure that the front seal is pushed in all the way, because the one I got from Mac Performance, it wasn't, I don't know, it passed inspection and ran on the machine, but the seal started leaking around the outside edge. This one here is put in all the way flush. The other one was sticking out just a little bit, and it makes a difference. So anyway, something to think about. You might say, well, why don't I just get a brand new pump? Well, apparently from what I've researched and I've found out from dealers is I don't think these are still available from Bosch new, because this is an R70 pump, and to work on this car you need the R70. You can't just get one from your Duramax and put it on here. They're not the same. These R70s have a smaller shaft on them. I found that out trying to find that seal, because it still got damaged. To replace it, of course, I pushed a new seal back on it. I actually had to take the front cover off, and I put a new seal and pressed it on. You have to use a press to put it on. It's really sensitive, so make sure you do it. If you have to do that, be very careful. And those seals for the R70 are for also the same as some of the Sprinter pumps that have the number 70. I think it's R70 or 70 has the same shaft size. So there's two different shaft size. And if you ask any Duramax place around in US, they all tell you, oh, well, they're all the same. No, they're not. There's the R70 or the 70 pumps, and then there's the ones that are, I don't know what the number is for the Duramax. They are different. Apparently these are not available new. I don't know if I said that earlier. So the ones you get are rebuilt. The rebuilt ones are good because are just fine, because the housing is actually made out of steel, unlike the CP4. This is a CP4 what comes on them. These are aluminum, and the reason that they fail, part of it is because of this being aluminum, and you got 25,000 pounds of fuel pressure, and it just wears out the bore, and the piston turns sideways and then starts rubbing on the cam. And it's happened as little as, I've heard of people as little as like 60,000 miles, and I've had a friend that his went out at an average of 120. That's more about the average from what I'm finding. And some people, if they drive all highway miles, or they just get lucky, I don't know how it works, but it's kind of a crapshoot. People say, well, it's because I run cleaner fuel. I don't think that's really the issue. It's definitely a design problem, in my opinion. There's another video on that you can look at to kind of what's his name? Vicada, I think is his name. YouTube channel has a difference between CP3 and CP4. It's, in my opinion, totally poorly designed, this thing. It's just, for that kind of pressure, it's just not enough meat in there for this thing. So, and it's a small roller, and what happens is the roller gets stuck. There's a little roller on the bottom that runs the push rod, and just like a skateboard, when you're riding a skateboard, you hit a little tiny rock and the wheel stops. What happens is any kind of debris gets in there at all, and it just gets on one side of that roller, and it turns the piston sideways, and then it just rubs on there, puts metal shavings in your system. Honestly, best fix is what I'm doing right now. CP3. There's a lot of places you can just buy these. You can try and figure it out on your own, and you'll find that the metering valves are all different. So there's a whole bunch of different combinations of metering valves, and these guys, Stevenson and Mac Performance, have figured out which metering valve to get. There's others out there. I'm just saying those guys are the ones that I know of. You can, those are things to be aware of when you're looking for it, because some guys will sell you a pump and it doesn't have the proper metering valve, and you have to get a tune after you're done in order for the thing to even run. So, if you get the one with the right metering valve on it, this metering valve is not on this one yet, but it's going to be. If you get it with the right metering valve included with it, then it should be able to go right into the car and run without a tune. But in hindsight, I would highly recommend getting a tune, because what they put in this thing to meet the emission standards, honestly, it just doesn't run very good. It doesn't run as good as it did when it was newer. I had the car before the tune. I got it after the tune from the dealer, and I drove it after I got a performance tune put in it. And honestly, after you get the pump put in, highly recommend the tune. It just makes the car run better. Apparently, guys that I've talked to that have it say they get better gas mileage. I haven't had mine long enough to know that, but I do know that it runs way better with the tune. It's not just power; it's the way the engine runs at lower RPMs and stuff like that. It's got power where you want it better, and it just runs better, and it feels like it's getting better mileage to me. But I haven't been able to run through a whole tank, so I can't tell you that. So anyway, to get the CP3 off, on with the procedure. I just wanted to get the stuff in there, information in the beginning. This pulley comes off. Your timing belt. Go ahead and do set your pin, set your stuff for doing a normal timing belt job. You might want to look that up. And do the timing belt at the same time, because you're going to have the timing belt completely off. So you might as well replace all the rollers and everything at the same time. That's what I'm doing. And at the same time, I'm also doing the oil pump on this, because this is a CBE engine, and they have a hex shaft that goes out in there. If you have a CBE, I highly recommend doing that too. In fact, that can be catastrophic to your engine. So this is catastrophic to your fuel system. The other one catastrophic to your engine. So those are two bulletproof items that I would do without even questioning it. So with the procedure, I'm going to go ahead and I took out these two bolts here to the pump. These two to the pump. Behind there's another one. You're going to need to remove the EGR and the, I don't know what this is, a flap, intake flap thing. I don't know. To make it so it doesn't overrun. That needs to come off. So, in this intake tube here probably has to come off too. I don't know if the whole intake tube comes off, but you could probably get off just this little section and take it out of there. And if you really want to make it easier on yourself, you can put it in service mode, if you know what that is, and might want to look into that. Also, this fuel line comes out. Honestly, the hardest part about this is if you're trying to keep it smog legal, is bending that fuel line. And I'm going to show you, hopefully I've learned something from doing it last time, that I've learned something how to bend that a little bit easier. So stay tuned for that. That's the hardest part. Everything else pretty much just bolts right on and the same way it came off, except for the fuel lines. And those I'll be doing at the very end, and you want to definitely take a look at how those fuel lines are run so that you can make sure your car runs when you're done. And the other thing to remember is you delete the secondary lift pump. So you have your primary lift pump in the gas tank, then you have that secondary one that's sitting right here. Nice, so you can have that space again, and you don't need that. So you just figure out a way to remount this bracket here for the, what is that called? I can't remember. Anyway, the exhaust pressure regulator, pressure sensor, whatever it is, I forget. But you mount that on there, and then you got a little more space to work on it in the future. So it's kind of nice, and you have a little more room for the other things here. More like a BRM. So it's kind of nice. Once you do get all done with it, then it's, you know, the car runs great with it on there. All right, for kicking around for me, I'm going to go ahead and go to service position. And it may not be necessary for this repair, but it sure does make life a whole lot easier, guys. A lot of you guys are going to be like, oh my God, take the whole front of the car off. Oh man. Actually, if you're going to work on this car at all, you better master service position. Because once you do that, you're not going to mind working on it that much, really. Once you've mastered taking this front end off. So it takes these two bolts here on. This is an Audi. It's a little different than the Volkswagen Jetta. It's almost the same. You got this bolt here, 2, 3, 4. You take all those off, and you take the front. There's a couple bolts on the side, and then the front, and then there's a few in the middle underneath, and the front bumper just slides right off. The whole bumper cover comes off, and then there's 8 bolts. You got 4 on this side, 4 on that side. You can use an impact gun to take them off if you want, and you know, basically a few wire connectors here. The radiator hoses, you want to connect those because I'm going to be doing the water pump anyway, so I'm going to have all the coolant out of it anyway. It would be nice to have it all completely flushed out, right? So it's not going to hurt anything to do. And then the fans, unplug the fans, and then just the whole front comes off. You got the turbo tubes down there because you got those off already, and the fender wells are already out. So there it is. A few more minutes, service, you're done. And then you have to evacuate the AC. Now, hypothetically, someone could go to Harbor Freight Tools and buy one of these. This is a vacuum pump. You plug it into air and then have a set of gauges, hypothetically. If it was legal to do so where you are, set of gauges like that, and evacuate the system and put Freon back in it, it's really not a big deal if it's legal to do so where you are. But since I'm also doing the dual mass flywheel right now, it just makes sense for me to just take the whole front of the car off. And then I can get my rattle gun in here to take that nut off. Well, I'll have to just grab the outside of it with a pair of pliers and hit it with the gun. It'll come right off. And it's a little bit tight in here. So, because this headlight's in the way. So, when I take the front end of the car off, the headlights will be out of there. The plugs to them come out. Those wires come out. The hood cable comes out. You just take the whole thing off. It takes a few minutes. One guy says he can do it in 20 minutes, start to finish. That's including evacuating the Freon and recovering it. That's a guy in the TDI club. That's what he says. So, hey, if he says it can be done, and that's Oil Hammer, I think his name is. He's the biggest poster on TDI club. He says 20 minutes, and I believe him. I think after you've done it a bunch of times, you'll get to know how easy it is, and then it just makes the car easier to work on. You're not busting your knuckles on everything. You get more space to work. You're not working these little tight quarters where you're 10 minutes to put a little stupid bolt in. You know, it's just so much easier. It's not about time. It's about keeping your sanity. If you want to fight little tight areas and get upset, do it the other way. You know, if you want to make it easier on yourself, go to service. Talk to you later when I get it all apart. All right, let's take a look at what full service position is. This thing's just sitting here on a jack right now. I'm going to take this whole front end off. I just wanted to kind of show you what you're up against. So everything comes off of there. Really, for me, it took me about 30 minutes. And that's including evacuating the Freon, you know, recovering it. I put it on a jack, so always put it on a jack whenever you do this, and don't forget your air conditioning lines. Make sure it's, you know, all the stuff's out of the system. And then to get these off right here, if you just kind of pry on them with so this thing, you put up this little clip right here on the hoses. And I do the lower one, I just pull the hose itself off. It's a little easier. Because sometimes this little clip is they can be a little bit feisty to get off. And so you just lift this clip up like that and then pry on it a little bit. While you're prying on it, and while you're prying on it, wiggle it around a lot, and then all of a sudden it'll just come right off. And then when you go to put it back on, if you're worried about that, that can be a little bit of a challenge too. I just get a little bit of soap, put it on the O-rings, they just slide right in, easy. Now, look how easy everything is to get to. So the rest of the repair is going to take you about half the amount of time. So you spend an hour, half an hour, 20 minutes, depends on how good you are. And now you have all the room to work. You can do the job on a chair, which is what I'm going to do. See that? This is how old guys work. Smart, not hard. So I'm sitting on my chair. I'll just get my tools nice and close, and I'll just go at it. just do everything I need to do right here and be done. And then I'm going to take out this whole tube here. See that little clip's kind of hard to reach. The intermediate bolt, I think it's behind in here. It's kind of hard to reach. I can get right to it. I'll just use a 1/4 inch drive extension, or even my full-size one, and just get in here and just do my job. Then while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and support the engine. I could actually take the engine out not too hard from here. You know, just disconnect the wiring harness. That's the hardest part, actually. It takes a lot of time to do. So it's easier for me to just go ahead and remove the transmission and leave the engine in. So I'm going to have to put the engine on a jack to get that mount off. But look, everything's right here. So it's really makes the repairs a lot easier. Huh. You know what's weird? This CBEA has a CJA, whatever, it has a CJA thermostat. The worst thermostat in the world. Yes, it does. Oh, this is not a CBE. This is a regular. This isn't a regular CBE. I'm going to check and see, pull the pan off, and I bet you anything it might not even have a hex shaft in it. So we will find that out later. But it does have a CBEA hose, and it has a CBEA block, because the CJAA block, because the other CBEs that I've worked on have the other kind of thermostat, and the block is what's different. On the block has to be like a CJA block. So we will find out later if I've got the same. I'll have to do the hex shaft. That'd be nice. That's odd, because VW usually they change an engine number when they do a change like that. So we will find out later. I've never worked on one of these Audis, so they're, you know, supposed to be the same, but they're different, obviously. Something's different, because the CBEA on the Volkswagen is definitely different than this CBEA on the Audi, because it has, this is the same lower hose as a CJAA, and the same thermostat, the worst thermostat in the world to ever change. Maybe, since I'm in service, I should take that off. Oh God, you gotta take the oil pump or the oil housing off. Oh man. Okay, we'll keep going. I'll bring you back in. I'm showing you guys the pump in this video anyway, but I'm just telling you about the other stuff I'm doing. If you're working on one of these, you might want to know some of that stuff too. Alright, so little trick here. If you're working smart instead of hard and you got your front end of your car off, you can easily take the air conditioning compressor out of the way, 3 bolts, and just slide it away real quick. And then use those bolts, or whatever bolts you have if you don't do it this way. I just used 2 of the bolts from the air conditioning compressor. On this has a 2-prong or 3-prong. You can just use a steering wheel puller. You can use almost anything to get this off. I just have this little puller here. I'll just yank that guy off real quick. Comes right off. Sometimes they're a little tight, but they come off pretty easy. Alright, so now the pump's ready to just pull right out of here. Just got a few little things in the way. Comes right out. When I'm using one hand, it's always harder. There's your CP4. Alright, this is the style of this bracket. Is a little bit different than the other one. The other one I had studs on it. This one doesn't, so obviously you put it in place here. And you put the bolts in. The flathead bolts in there from the kit. Obviously the 2 long ones go on the bottom. The little tiny short one goes on the top with the Allen head there. 3 nuts. You can see this one here mounts on pretty flushed, almost to the normal distance there. I ground my other one down a little bit to make sure it was flush. I don't think you really need to, but I'll let you make the judgment call on that. Yeah, after that, you go ahead and slide the pump on. you guys are afraid of this. This is really not that bad. The hardest part is bending the line if you're keeping all your original equipment. But I'm going to keep all the original equipment, so I'm going to show you that. And I think I can make it a little bit easier. So be very careful not to get any dirt inside any of this stuff. Fuel system is not very forgiving with dirt. Alright, so when you're tightening this down, be really careful. Just do it really slowly, because on this particular kit, on the other one I had no issues. But on this one, this is just a tad off line here. So if it starts to go crooked, just stop. And that's what I did here. And then if you keep going, you might bend it a little bit. So take it back off, put it back on a couple times. Just make sure it goes all the way in tight. You know, it doesn't feel weird. It doesn't start to go crooked, because they'll do that. And then if it does, like mine started to go crooked, I'm just going to get a file out and clean that up really good. That little bit of edge, you see that little edge? It started to go crooked on me, so it's got to be in there straight. Because if this is a little bit off, it'll come loose, and then you'll have major issues. So it's got to be in there right. So make sure it's all the way down. When you tighten it down, it's all the way down flush, and the bracket's not bent and hanging out or anything like that. Just make sure, take your time, take it on and off a couple times if you have to make sure it just flushes. On the other kit I put on, it just bolted right on. It just slid right into place. I'm not sure. Maybe he made his hole a little bit bigger, and then it just slides into this aluminum one behind it, because that's what it needs to line up to, is that aluminum one right there. So, and it might be because he had studs in his, and you know, that's Mac Performance. The last one I put on, it bolted right on. I don't know if they all do. It's a crapshoot, I think. So take your time. The stud came out of this one, so I'm gonna have to either put that in and weld it. Probably that's what I'll do. And then, you know, that's what mine did, because it went in, started going crooked, and then I tried to straighten it out, and then I should have just taken it back off. So if yours starts to do that, take it back off, check everything out, clean it, be very careful putting that on, because if that goes crooked, like I said, it's going to be bad days in the future. So it's just got to be right, okay? So if it starts to go on crooked or anything, take it back off, start over, you know, check it out. All right, so the pump is on. I'm going to tell you what I went through to get it on there. I was having trouble lining up the bracket with the hole, and everything has to line up. I mean, it's got to be really good, well lined up. And the way that they make this one with the studs not welded in is a problem, because what happens is you really need to tighten up these last, okay? So that's, you know, you need to be tightening up these last so you can line everything up and put it in place, okay? Or maybe you could line it all up and put it in place and try and hand tighten them. I don't know, but what happens is, as I kept trying, and what would happen is you go to put the pump in, it wouldn't line up the two holes in the middle. You know, this hole behind here, I didn't bolted it on yet, but the aluminum hole here and the stainless steel hole from their part have to line up together to get the pump to go all the way in. And so be careful when you tighten these, because if you tighten them up and you just kind of ignore that and figure it'll just line itself up, you'll bend this bracket, then you'll be fighting straightening it. You know, I've been doing all that stuff, so save yourself some grief. And what I did, then you can figure out a way to do it. I don't know, maybe even just J&B them in place, just so that they stay in place, so then you can tighten them last. But what I did is I just tack welded them. I just tack welded them to this bracket, and then I could put everything in, and I could kind of tighten these ones up a little bit, just put nuts on them and make sure it was all the way lined up, and then tighten these up. So that's what I had to do to get it to work. So the Mac Performance one already has the studs on it, so that eliminates that. I think that's a little bit better in that respect. There's things I like about both of the kits. I'm not going to say either one's better than the other, but of course this one's a lot cheaper, and this one came from England. Whether that means anything to you, I don't know. But okay, I'm putting on this thing. See the red Loctite in my hand? I'm going to red Loctite this thing on, because the way I look at it, my theory is you do not want this thing to thread itself inside the fuel line, because you'll never get it out of there. So I want to put it on there permanently. I'm going to use red Loctite on the threads, on this part of the threads, not on the outside of the threads, only on that part. So now red Loctite is holding those set of threads on there. Nothing goes on the outside of those. I want to keep those so that I can just screw it on, but I don't want this sleeve to come off of that stud. I just want it to be on there, because believe me, if you don't do it, you'll be crying about it later, because you got to take on and off that fuel line a bunch of times and to get it to line up if you're going to do the way that I'm doing it, where you're going through the going to leave EGR and all that on. So anyway, now is the time for the infamous fuel line bend. What I do is I slid a 19mm wrench, goes right over this thing here, and you can just kind of get it in there and bend it wherever you need to go. That's actually working pretty well. So I'll show you how I bend the line. I took all the clamps off too. I'm going to put the clamps back on. I believe it's really important to have those. A lot of people might say you don't need the clamps, but I've had many a diesel engine Volkswagens, and on the older ones especially, if you didn't put all the clamps back on, they would always crack. So I'm not going to take a chance on it. I want to put on some clamps. You could do it however you want. If you decided not to put any on, that's up to you. But I'm going to put as many of these clamps back on. So I know that I can fit two. Put one here, and I can bend it a little bit and get one on there, and not put one on here. Something like that. So that's what I did on the other one. I'll show you what I'm doing in a minute. That's how I do it. You can do it however you want. I have no idea how long it's going to last. I'll tell you, this is so much easier than last time. I'm going to go ahead and put one clamp on here. I just put the 19 on here and just start bending it. It's really kind of hard to bend, but it's not that bad. I'm just going to pop back on the EGR valve so I can get the right thing set up. Alright, the first time took me like a few hours to do. I just about got it in like 10 minutes here. He said, Mac Performance told me he could do it in 10 minutes, so I believe him now. Once you use the wrench idea, you'll just see I just shorten this up a little bit. I'm going to put a clamp here, so I'm going to line that up a little bit better. Make sure it's not touching anything. You don't want it to touch anything. And then also this thing here for this is the Egr plug. I believe that's the right one. That needs to be, they show on the thing to take a razor blade and cut that off. That all the part that this part right here, the part that clicks in place, they say to shave that off with a razor blade. I use a grinder. I just take a flapper wheel and go in there and do it. It's easier while I have the EGR out. I'll just take the EGR back out because I just put it in with one bolt, and then just to use it for shaping it. I'll finish shaping this up and we'll take another look at it, but I'm just showing you it literally took me about 15 minutes to bend that. And you could make it look real nice if you want. And I'm just going to make it functional, and then I'll probably bend this part up a little bit. Like I'll take this little dip out of it and I'll just bring it up and then make it so that it lines up with that, and make it so it still goes to the right place here. That's pretty much there. I mean, that's probably gonna even start. I don't want to do it yet because that's not dry yet. I want to make sure that red Loctite's good and dry. I don't want that. See, if that thing gets stuck inside there, you're never gonna get it out. It'll be a real pain in the butt. I have to tell you, that wasn't bad. I thought it was gonna be so hard. last time. I knew it was going to be a lot easier because I knew the method. So that is in place. Now the thing I always look for is to make sure it's not touching anything, because if it's touching something, that little micro vibration will eventually cause a rupture in the line. So make sure. The only thing it needs to be touching are these. That's why they use rubber clamps here. These little rubber clamps. I'll make sure the little rubber is good that's in them, and it's, you know, all in place. That's what I would do. And so voila. Let's check the metering valve. I checked it already. It should be plenty of clearance the way I got it now. Alright, so got the metering valve on. I just got to put on these two lines here. I believe this one goes to, there's a part on the fuel filter. I have to spin it around so I get the right one. I think it's the one right there. It just goes from here to there, and then this line goes from here down there. That's how my other one was, I believe. I'll look at it. And I just grind that down like that. I leave the little tab thing so it can lock in place. That way if you ever have to take it off, you just flip that little guy up and then it'll stay on. If you don't, if you get rid of it, you know, usually they'll stay in place anyways. But all right, these things go on like this. Bolt, washer, line, washer. Right, that's how I'm putting mine. Like that. One here, one there. That one goes on like that. This is something I like about this kit, is they give you these. So you could cut them and solder them in if you're not successful getting them out. But I usually will just take a very small wire, a stiff wire, and shove it. So get a focus on that. Shove it in those two little holes on either side of the clip, inside there. Right inside there. There's two little holes there, and then push it, and then you can usually pull the wire out and replace it. So I do like that with these little wires. If you see in that little spot there, get a better focus. See if it'll focus really close. So you can see right in there, and then wiggle it around a lot, and then pull on the wire with a little pair of pliers. Be careful, it could break, but you know, that's why they have the extra piece that you can solder in if you need to. But I usually can get them out. That one came out not too bad. Had to pull on it quite a bit, more than you might think. Alright, perfect example. This one, I had to pull on it quite a bit and it broke. So, good thing we have those extra little solder pieces. It doesn't matter which the order of these go in. They can just go in the clip either way. All it does is complete the circuit. So, got a solder one on there. We'll get it done. Alright, so it's been a few days here. I've been working on all the other things I'm doing. And now I've got, what I do is I use the other pieces of the hose that are remaining. Of course, I reused that one, the same one. I don't know if that's the direction it went. That's the way I went with it. It doesn't really matter that much. And I bent this so that I could reuse this hose. Just take your same way you do this, just put a wrench over it. The box end of the wrench bends nice and easy. You know, it's tough to bend, but it bends. It works great. Just like this thing works great. No leaks. I need to put this bracket on. This bracket, you need to grind it down to make it fit in there, and you might have to grind down the bolt in so that it's tight. It fits in there. So I got to put that bracket on still. But this is how the hoses are routed now. The secondary fuel pump is deleted. It starts right up. But you will notice this, when you start your car now after having the CP3, it takes a couple more revolutions to start. But once it starts, no engine light, you know, for me, it's possible to get one, and then you might have to get a tune. But if you get those same parts that I get, usually there's no tune required. It does fit again with all the smog equipment in place. Now I need to recheck that line, make sure it's not touching anything. If this line here is rubbing against something, it won't be long before it rubs through that line, and with 25,000 pounds of pressure, it'll break it, you know, and then you'll be doing that again. I mean, it's not that big of a deal if that happened, right? You could probably handle doing that. But that's, you know, it's a lot better than metal shavings in your whole system and have the whole car, you know, basically $9,000 repair at the dealer, or, you know, days of your time trying to fix it. So simple things like that you can deal with much easier than the big problem of the fuel pump going out. So, and then waiting for parts for that. Yeah. So all that needs to be done now is, just need to cut down this bracket and put it on. So I do about like that, fit it on there. And then make sure that the bolt doesn't bottom out in it. There, it looks good. Make sure that when you put it on, the bolt doesn't, you might have to shorten the bolt a little bit. I think the threads miss it, but not, no, they're gonna hit it. So the bolt has to be the right length too. So this bolt you might have to shorten just a little bit. You can't let it push the pump out. That's if you're gonna run this. You could not run this, I guess. But I like to put it on because it's nice to use to hold the engine up. Like if you took it to a shop or something, they might want to use that hook. A lot of them like to use that one. So should be on there. Anyway, I think you guys can figure that out. There's directions on the internet for that. But make sure that when that bolt doesn't push the pump outward. Because if that pump's cockeyed a little bit, your belt's going to wear out like real fast, and it could wear out really fast, and it could, you know, cause a major issue with the engine. So just take your time, make sure everything's right on this thing. These cars are very finicky. Everything has to be right. If you don't do it right, you do it twice. That's what I tell everybody. Whatever you don't do right, you'll be doing it again. So take your time, do it right, and then it won't need anything for a long time. The cars are very low maintenance. There's not a lot to do to these. You know, they're very simple cars. They're very hard to work on cars. They're very complex cars. But when it comes to maintenance, once you've got everything right, there isn't much. You know, there really isn't that much maintenance on the diesel. There's not much that goes really that wrong with these, other than there's engine lights. You just got to get good at figuring out those, you know, getting a Rostec, go in there, check the codes, look up on the internet what the codes are, and try and fix them yourself. Otherwise, if somebody has to take one of these things to the dealer all the time to get it serviced, it's really not going to be worth it. It isn't. It's just going to cost you so much money. You're just going to be one of those guys like Scotty Kilmer that complains about these cars all the time. So that's the way it works out usually. All right, I'll talk to you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll talk to you in the next one.